The moment I saw Patricia marching across my snow-covered lawn in her designer boots that were completely inappropriate for 8 inches of fresh Colorado powder, I knew my peaceful morning was about to turn into another HOA nightmare. I had just settled into my breakfast, watching the sunrise paint the mountains behind Boulder pink and orange through my kitchen window when I heard the aggressive knock on my door. The kind of knock that says the person doing it believes they own not just their house, but yours too. I took my time getting to the door, mostly because I already knew who it was and what she wanted. Patricia Henderson, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, stood on my porch with that pinched expression she always wore, her bleached blonde hair pulled back so tight I wondered if it gave her headaches. "Zachary Xavier," she said, not waiting for me to greet her. "We need to discuss your obligations to this community." "Good morning to you too, Patricia," I said, leaning against the door frame and taking a sip of my coffee. "What obligations are we talking about today?" She pulled out a printed document from her expensive leather folder, the kind that screamed unnecessary spending of HOA dues. As per Section 17, Subsection 4 of the Meadowbrook Estates Community Guidelines, all residents are required to assist in snow removal operations during winter weather events. I blinked at her. "Patricia, I cleared my driveway and sidewalk at 6 this morning. I watched you drive past while I was out there." "I am not talking about your property, Zachary. I am talking about the cul-de-sac." She pointed dramatically down the street toward the circular dead end where 5 houses sat, including hers. "The residents of Mountain View Circle require immediate snow removal services, and according to our records, you own a commercial-grade snow plow." This was news to me. "I own a pickup truck with a plow attachment that I use for my driveway and to help my neighbors." "That does not make me the HOA's personal snow removal service." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "The HOA guidelines clearly state that residents with snow removal equipment must make themselves available for community snow clearing operations. You signed the agreement when you purchased your property." "I signed an agreement that said I would keep my property maintained and follow reasonable community standards. I did not sign up to be your free labor." I started to close the door, but she stuck her boot in the way. "If you refuse to comply with HOA regulations, we will have no choice but to begin the fine process. $50 per day until you complete your community obligations." I stopped. "You are going to fine me for not plowing roads that the HOA does not even own." "The cul-de-sac is designated community space in the original development plan. That makes it HOA responsibility, which means it is the responsibility of all residents, particularly those with the means to maintain it." I could feel my jaw clenching. I had lived in Meadowbrook Estates for 3 years, and in that time, Patricia had tried to fine me for having my garage door open for more than 2 hours while I worked on my furniture restoration projects, for planting native wildflowers instead of approved landscaping, and for having a truck that she deemed too large for the neighborhood aesthetic. I had fought every single one of those battles and won, mostly because Patricia made up rules that did not actually exist in the HOA documents. "Show me where in the actual HOA covenant it says that," I said. She flipped through her folder with sharp, angry movements. "It is in the revised guidelines that were distributed last month." The revised guidelines that were never actually voted on by the community. Those guidelines, her face went red. "The HOA board has the authority to implement necessary policies without community vote, as per our governing structure." "Actually, Patricia, major policy changes require a community vote. I looked it up after your last attempt to fine me. I had learned to do my homework when it came to the HOA." So unless you have something in the original covenant, I am going to finish my breakfast." "Fine," she snapped. "Then I will file a formal complaint with the board, and we will discuss your membership in this community at the next meeting. In the meantime, the residents of Mountain View Circle are trapped in their homes because of the snow, and you are refusing to help your neighbors." That made me pause. "Trapped? Patricia, I saw you drive out of the cul-de-sac an hour ago." "Well, not trapped exactly, but it is extremely difficult to navigate, and some residents have expressed safety concerns. So drive slowly and carefully like everyone else in Colorado does when it snows." She pulled herself up to her full height, which was still a solid 6 inches shorter than me. "You will regret this, Zachary. This community has standards, and people who do not want to contribute to our collective well-being do not belong here." With that, she turned and marched back across my lawn, leaving deep footprints in the snow that I had cleared from my walkway. I watched her navigate back to her silver Lexus SUV, which had absolutely no problem driving through the residential street snow, and head back toward her cul-de-sac. I closed the door and went back to my coffee, figuring that was the end of it. Patricia was always making threats she could not back up, but I should have known better. 2 days later, I found a formal letter in my mailbox. It was from the Meadowbrook Estates, HOA board, signed by Patricia and 2 other board members I barely knew, informing me that I was being fined $250 for failure to comply with community snow removal obligations. The letter cited the same non-existent revised guidelines and gave me 10 days to either pay the fine or appear before the board to contest it. I called my neighbor, Derek, who had served on the HOA board before Patricia took over and turned it into her personal fiefdom. "She cannot do this, right?" I asked him. Derek sighed over the phone. "Technically, no, but Patricia has been pulling this kind of thing for the past year. She finds people. They either pay because it is easier than fighting, or they show up to the board meeting where she and her friends outvote any objections. But the guidelines she is citing do not exist. They exist in her mind, and she convinced the other 2 board members to go along with it. Zachary, my advice, either pay the fine or sell your house and move somewhere without an HOA. I tried fighting her on the native plants issue last year, and she made my life hell for 6 months. I hung up feeling frustrated and angry. The idea of paying a fine for something I did not do went against everything in my nature. I ran my own small business restoring antique furniture, which meant I was self-employed and stubborn as hell. If I let Patricia push me around on this, she would never stop. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I requested a copy of the original HOA covenant from the county records office, paid a lawyer $200 to review it, and prepared my case for the board meeting. The meeting was held in Patricia's house, which should have been the first red flag that this whole organization was questionable. About 15 residents showed up, most of them there to discuss other business. I waded through 30 minutes of debate about whether holiday decorations should be limited to specific color schemes, a discussion about updating the community playground equipment, and a proposal to increase HOA dues to pay for professional landscaping at the entrance. Finally, Patricia looked at me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Now we will address the matter of Zachary Xavier and his refusal to participate in community snow removal." I stood up with my folder of documents. "Before we get into that, I would like to clarify what my actual obligations are according to the HOA covenant." "Your obligations are clearly outlined in the community guidelines," Patricia said. "The original covenant, which is the only legally binding document, says that homeowners are responsible for maintaining their individual properties and any shared common spaces. It defines common spaces as the playground, the entrance landscaping, and the walking trail. It does not mention the cul-de-sac at Mountain View Circle. One of the other board members, a man named Richard, frowned. But the cul-de-sac is community property. Actually, it is not. I pulled out the county property records. The cul-de-sac is a public road maintained by Boulder County. I called the county office to confirm. They handle snow removal for all public roads, including that one. Patricia's face went pale, then red. That is irrelevant. The HOA has taken responsibility for maintaining it to a higher standard than the county provides. Which is fine if you want to hire someone to do that, but you cannot force residents to provide free labor for something that is not their responsibility. I looked at the other board members. I also had a lawyer review the covenant. The revised guidelines that Patricia has been citing were never legally adopted because they were never put to a community vote. Any fines based on those guidelines are not enforceable. The room went quiet. A few residents looked interested now, probably people who had been fined by Patricia for other invented violations. "This is ridiculous," Patricia said, her voice getting higher. "You are disrupting this entire meeting with your technicalities. I am defending myself against a bogus fine." "There is a difference." Richard cleared his throat. "Patricia, did we vote on the revised guidelines? The board approved them. But did the community vote on them? Because I am looking at the covenant here, and it does say major policy changes require a majority community vote." Patricia stood up, slamming her folder on the table. "Fine. The fine is rescinded, but this is exactly the kind of selfish attitude that is destroying this community. We have residents who need help, and people like Zachary would rather hide behind legal technicalities than be good neighbors." "I am happy to help my neighbors when they ask," I said calmly. "What I am not willing to do is be forced into unpaid labor based on made-up rules." The meeting ended shortly after that, with Patricia in a fury and several other residents coming up to ask me about getting their own fines reviewed. I left feeling vindicated, but also knowing that I had just made an enemy who would not forget. I was right. Over the next 3 weeks, I received violation notices for having my trash bins visible from the street more than 12 hours after pickup, for parking my truck in my driveway instead of my garage, and for having a ladder leaning against my house while I cleaned my gutters. Each violation came with a fine, and each one I fought, and won because Patricia was literally making things up. But the whole situation was exhausting and taking time away from my actual work. I started to understand why Derek had told me to just pay the fines. It would have been cheaper and easier. Then we got another snowstorm. This one was bigger than the first, dumping nearly 14 inches overnight. I woke up at 5 in the morning to start clearing my driveway, knowing it would take a couple of hours with this much snow. I was halfway done when I saw Patricia's Lexus pull up to the edge of my property. She rolled down her window. "I hope you are planning to clear the cul-de-sac today." I stopped pushing snow and looked at her. "Patricia, we literally just went through this." "I am not responsible for clearing public roads." "Actually, you are. The county has informed us that they are prioritizing major roads due to the storm volume. Residential areas may not be cleared for several days. That means it falls to the residents to handle their own streets. That means it falls to the individual homeowners on those streets, not to me specifically." She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "I spoke with the other Mountain View Circle residents, and we have all agreed to pool our resources to hire professional snow removal. We are asking all community members to contribute. Your share would be $150. "No, thank you. I will stick to clearing my own property." "Fine. but you should know that we have decided to use the entrance to the cul-de-sac as a staging area for the snow removal. There may be some equipment blocking access to the main road temporarily. I should have paid more attention to that threat, but I was cold and tired and just wanted to finish my driveway. I waved her off and went back to work. By mid-afternoon, I had finished my property and helped my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, clear her driveway too. I came inside, made some lunch, and settled in to work on a Victorian dresser I was restoring. I was deep into stripping the old varnish when my phone rang. It was Derek. "Please tell me you did not do what Patricia is claiming you did," he said. "I have been in my workshop all afternoon. What is she claiming?" "She just posted in the community Facebook group that you plowed the cul-de-sac snow into a giant pile blocking the entrance and trapping the residents inside." I set down my scraper. "What? I have not been anywhere near the cul-de-sac." "That's what I figured, but she has photos." "She is claiming you did it in retaliation for being asked to contribute to the professional snow removal." "Derek, I have been home all day. I did not plow anything except my own driveway and Mrs. Chen's." "Can you prove that?" I thought about it. "Mrs. Chen can verify that I helped her this morning, and I have been in my workshop since noon. My security camera should show my truck has not moved." "Good. Because Patricia is talking about calling the police and filing vandalism charges." I hung up and immediately went to check my security camera footage. Sure enough, my truck had not moved since I parked it after helping Mrs. Chen. I downloaded the footage and then made the mistake of checking the Meadowbrook Estates Facebook group. Patricia had posted several photos of a massive snow pile at the entrance to the cul-de-sac, easily 10 feet high and completely blocking the road. The post said, "Thanks to Zachary Xavier's childish retaliation, the residents of Mountain View Circle are now completely trapped in their homes." This is what happens when selfish people put their pride above community safety. The HOA board will be taking immediate legal action. The comments were a mix of people taking her side and others questioning whether I would actually do something like that. I was about to post my security footage when my phone rang again. This time it was a number I did not recognize. "Mr. Xavier. This is Officer Martinez with the Boulder Police Department. We have received a complaint about property destruction and illegal snow dumping." "Can you tell me where you have been today?" I explained everything, offered to send the security footage, and told her exactly what had been happening with Patricia and the HOA. To her credit, Officer Martinez listened to the whole thing without interrupting. "Mr. Xavier, can you meet me at the entrance to Mountain View Circle in about 20 minutes? I would like to take a look at this snow pile and get your statement in person." I agreed and bundled back up in my winter gear. When I got to the cul-de-sac entrance, I found Officer Martinez examining the massive pile of snow blocking the road. Patricia was there too, along with several other Mountain View Circle residents. "There he is," Patricia said immediately. "Officer, that is the man who created this dangerous situation." Officer Martinez held up a hand. "Madam, I will handle this. Mr. Xavier, is this your work?" "No, officer. As I told you on the phone, I have been home all day. My security footage shows my truck has not left my driveway since this morning." "He could have done it this morning," Patricia said. "Mrs. Henderson, I saw the timestamps on your Facebook post. You claim this happened around 2 p.m. My footage will show my truck was parked at that time, and I have a witness who can confirm I was helping her with her driveway this morning, nowhere near this location." Officer Martinez walked around the pile, examining it closely. Then she did something that made me notice details I had missed before. She started looking at the tire tracks in the snow around the pile. "Mr. Xavier, what kind of plow do you have?" Standard 7-foot straight blade on a Ford F-250. She nodded and took some photos with her phone. And Mrs. Henderson, who did you hire for the professional snow removal you mentioned? Patricia hesitated. We hired Rocky Mountain Snow Services. And what time did they arrive? Around 1 p.m. Officer Martinez took more photos. Did you specifically instruct them where to push the snow? Patricia's face went through several expressions. I told them to clear the cul-de-sac efficiently. I see. Officer Martinez turned to me. Mr. Xavier, I do not think you need to worry about charges. These tire tracks are from a commercial loader, much larger than your truck could make. And the pile placement is consistent with someone clearing the cul-de-sac and pushing all the snow to the entrance rather than distributing it evenly or hauling it away. Are you suggesting I did this? Patricia's voice went shrill. I am suggesting that the snow removal company you hired pushed all the snow from the cul-de-sac into this pile, which happened to block the entrance. Whether that was intentional or just poor planning, I cannot say. But Mr. Xavier clearly did not do it. I felt a wave of relief, but Officer Martinez was not done. However, this pile is now blocking a public road, which is a violation. Someone needs to remove it. The county can handle it, Patricia said. The county is backed up for days, and this is creating a safety hazard. Whoever hired the snow removal company is responsible for ensuring they did the job properly. Officer Martinez looked at Patricia. That would be you, Mrs. Henderson. Patricia's mouth opened and closed, but we paid them to clear the snow. Then I suggest you call them back and have them move it properly. In the meantime, I am going to file a report that clears Mr. Xavier of any wrongdoing. She turned to me. You are free to go. I would recommend documenting all your interactions with the HOA from now on. I thanked her and headed home, but not before seeing the look of pure fury on Patricia's face. I knew this was not over. That night, I got an email from the HOA board informing me that there would be an emergency meeting to discuss my ongoing harassment of the Mountain View Circle residents. The email claimed that even though I had not physically created the snow pile, my refusal to help with snow removal had created the situation that led to it. The logic was insane, but I was starting to realize that Patricia operated on her own version of reality where she was never wrong and everything bad that happened was someone else's fault. I almost did not go to the meeting. I was tired of the drama, tired of fighting, and starting to seriously consider Derek's advice about selling my house. But something about the way Patricia had tried to frame me for vandalism made me angry enough to show up. The meeting was packed. Word had spread about the snow pile incident, and people were curious. I recognized some faces from the neighborhood, including several people who had received bogus fines from Patricia over the years. Patricia started the meeting with a long speech about community values and how certain residents were determined to undermine the HOA's efforts to maintain standards. She never said my name, but everyone knew who she meant. Then she opened the floor for comments, clearly expecting her supporters to back her up. Instead, a woman named Sarah Ellington stood up. I have a question about these revised guidelines Patricia keeps citing. I received a fine last month for having the wrong color mailbox, but I checked my original HOA documents and there is no color requirement listed. Another hand went up. A man I did not know said, I was fined for having my garage door open while I was unloading groceries. The fine notice cited revised guidelines that I never received or voted on. More hands went up. More stories of ridiculous fines and made-up rules. I watched Patricia's face get redder and redder. This is not the purpose of this meeting, she said loudly. We are here to discuss Zachary Xavier's behavior. Actually, Richard said quietly. "I think we need to discuss the HOA board's behavior. I have been reviewing the covenant documents, and I do not think we have been following proper procedures for the past year." Patricia stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "This is a coup. You are all ganging up on me because I am trying to maintain property values and community standards." "No, Patricia," Sarah said. "We are asking questions because you have been abusing your authority as HOA president. You have been making up rules, issuing illegal fines, and creating problems where none existed." "I second that," Derek said, standing up. "I move that we vote to remove Patricia Henderson as HOA president and conduct a full review of all fines issued in the past year." The room erupted in discussion. Patricia was shouting about betrayal and how she had worked tirelessly for this community. But when Richard called for a vote, the result was overwhelming. Patricia was removed as president, and a committee was formed to review the HOA's practices and rewrite the guidelines according to proper legal procedures. Patricia stormed out, threatening lawsuits and claiming we would all regret this. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe in my own neighborhood. The story should have ended there. Patricia lost her position, the HOA started operating properly, and life went back to normal. But Patricia was not the kind of person who accepted defeat. 2 weeks after the meeting, I woke up to find my truck had been vandalized. Someone had slashed all 4 tires, keyed deep scratches into the paint, and spray-painted "Community Trader" across the hood. I called the police, and Officer Martinez came out to take the report. She walked around the truck, photographing the damage. "Any idea who might have done this?" she asked. "One very angry former HOA president," I said. "Patricia Henderson." "That would be my guess." Officer Martinez nodded. "Do you have security cameras?" "I do, but they are focused on my front door and driveway entrance. The truck was parked on the street, just out of range." She checked with my neighbors, but no one had seen anything. The vandalism had happened sometime between midnight and 6 a.m. Without video evidence, there was not much the police could do. But I was not the only target. Over the next week, 3 other people who had spoken up at the meeting had their property vandalized. Sarah had her mailbox destroyed. Derek's fence was graffitied. Another neighbor had their garden completely torn up. The police started taking it more seriously when it became a pattern. They increased patrols in the neighborhood and started investigating Patricia specifically. I installed additional security cameras, these ones covering my entire property and the street. That is when things got really weird. I was reviewing my camera footage one morning when I noticed something strange. A silver Lexus SUV had driven slowly past my house at 3 a.m. The same model Patricia drove, but the license plate was not quite visible in the dark. I mentioned it to Officer Martinez when she called for an update on my case. "That is interesting," she said. "We have been seeing a silver Lexus in the area on several nights when vandalism occurred. The problem is proving who was driving it. Can you check traffic cameras? We are working on it. In the meantime, keep your cameras running and let me know if you see anything else suspicious." 3 nights later, my cameras caught something. At 2:30 a.m., a figure in dark clothing approached my house. They were carrying what looked like a can of spray paint. But before they could get close, my motion sensor lights turned on, flooding the area with brightness. The figure ran, but not before my camera got a clear shot of their face. It was not Patricia. It was her son, Trevor Henderson, a 24-year-old who still lived with his mother. I called Officer Martinez immediately and sent her the footage. By noon, police had picked up Trevor for questioning. By evening, he had confessed to all the vandalism incidents. According to his statement, Patricia had been ranting about how the HOA members had betrayed her and destroyed everything she had built. She had convinced Trevor that the people who voted her out were ruining the neighborhood and needed to be taught a lesson. Trevor claimed his mother had not specifically told him to vandalize property, but she had made it clear she wanted people to understand there were consequences for their actions. Patricia was arrested for conspiracy to commit vandalism and several related charges. Trevor was charged with multiple counts of criminal mischief and property destruction. I thought that would be the end of it. But Patricia's lawyer was good, and she was released on bail within 24 hours. The next HOA meeting, which she had no right to attend as a removed board member, she showed up anyway. Security had to escort her out when she started screaming about conspiracies and how everyone was working together to destroy her life. It would have been sad if she had not been so determined to make everyone else miserable. The legal process moved slowly. Trevor took a plea deal that involved restitution, community service, and probation. Patricia's case was more complicated because she had not directly committed the vandalism, and her lawyer argued she had no knowledge of what her son was doing. But then, the prosecutors found her text messages. She had been texting Trevor things like, "These people need to understand what happens when they cross me, and the Ellington woman deserves whatever she gets." While not direct orders to commit vandalism, the texts showed a pattern of encouraging her son's actions. The case went to trial. I had to testify, along with Sarah, Derek, and several other neighbors. We talked about the pattern of harassment, the bogus fines, the illegal guidelines, and Patricia's increasingly erratic behavior after being removed as president. The defense tried to paint Patricia as a dedicated community volunteer who had been unfairly targeted by ungrateful neighbors. But the prosecutor laid out a clear timeline of escalating behavior, from petty rule enforcement to encouraging criminal activity. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Patricia was found guilty of conspiracy to commit vandalism and witness intimidation. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and ordered her to pay full restitution to all the vandalism victims. Trevor, who had cooperated with the prosecution, received a lighter sentence of 6 months in county jail and 5 years of probation. I wish I could say I felt good about it, but mainly I just felt tired. The whole situation had consumed nearly a year of my life. My truck had been repaired, but I could still see where the paint was slightly different. My insurance had covered most of it, but I had to pay a $1,000 deductible. The HOA, under new leadership, voted to dissolve the revised guidelines entirely and go back to the original covenant. We also voted to limit the board's authority and require community votes for any significant decisions. Sarah Ellington was elected the new president, and she ran things with a light touch that felt revolutionary after Patricia's reign. Life slowly returned to normal. I went back to focusing on my furniture restoration business. Mrs. Chen baked me cookies to thank me for standing up to the HOA. Derek and I became good friends, often having beers on my back porch while complaining about the absurdity of homeowner associations. But the story was not quite over. 6 months into Patricia's sentence, I received a letter. It was from her, written from the correctional facility where she was serving her time. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was not what I expected. It was not an apology, but it was not more threats either. It was rambling and somewhat incoherent, talking about how she had only wanted to make the neighborhood beautiful and safe, how people did not appreciate her efforts, how her ex-husband had left her, and the HOA presidency was the only thing that made her feel important. There was a strange vulnerability to it that made me see her as a person rather than just the villain of my story. She was clearly someone who had tied her entire self-worth to controlling a homeowner association, and when that was taken away, she had spiraled. I did not write back. I was not interested in being her therapist or forgiving her for the hell she had put me and my neighbors through. But I did keep the letter, tucked away in a drawer, as a reminder that sometimes people who seem like monsters are really just broken people who found a little bit of power and did not know what to do with it except abuse it. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA continued under Sarah's leadership, and it became what it was supposed to be: a simple organization that handled basic community maintenance and organized the occasional neighborhood event. No more made-up rules, no more harassment, no more drama. As for the cul-de-sac that started it all, the county eventually did clear it properly, and the Mountain View Circle residents hired a professional service that actually knew how to distribute snow properly, rather than creating giant blocking piles. I still live in my house in Meadowbrook Estates. I still restore antique furniture in my garage with the door open as long as I want. I still park my truck in my driveway. And every time it snows, I clear my own property and help Mrs. Chen with hers, but I do not touch the cul-de-sac. Not because I am being petty, but because I learned that sometimes the best way to deal with unreasonable demands is to simply draw a boundary and stick to it, no matter how much pressure someone applies. The whole experience taught me a lot about power, community, and how quickly a small amount of authority can corrupt someone who ties their identity to controlling others. It also taught me the value of actually reading the documents you sign when you buy a house, because buried in all that legal language might be the ammunition you need to fight back against someone who thinks they can make up rules as they go. But mostly, it taught me that standing up for yourself is exhausting and often not worth it in the moment, but absolutely necessary if you want to live with yourself. I could have paid those first fines, moved on with my life, and avoided all the drama. But then, Patricia would have kept pushing, kept inventing new violations, kept making life miserable for me and everyone else in the neighborhood. By fighting back, even when it was difficult and stressful, I helped create change that made life better for everyone in Meadowbrook Estates. Well, everyone except Patricia. The neighborhood held a spring barbecue that year, the first community event that actually felt like a community rather than a photo opportunity for the HOA president to feel important. Kids played in the street. People brought homemade food instead of catered trays, and there was no one standing around with a clipboard making sure everything matched the approved color scheme. Derek brought his famous ribs. Sarah organized games for the kids. Mrs. Chen brought enough dumplings to feed the entire neighborhood twice over. And I brought my portable speaker and a playlist of classic rock that got the older residents nodding along and the younger ones politely tolerating. It was normal. It was nice. It was what a neighborhood should be. As I stood there, beer in hand, watching the sun set behind the mountains and listening to my neighbors laugh and talk, I realized that this was what Patricia had been so afraid of all along. Not chaos, or declining property values or community standards slipping. She had been afraid of not being needed. She had created problems so she could solve them, invented rules so she could enforce them, manufactured crises so she could be the hero. And when people finally said they did not need or want that kind of leadership, she could not handle it. It was sad in a way, but it was not my problem anymore. I stayed at that barbecue until the stars came out and the temperature dropped enough that people started packing up. I helped fold tables and carry chairs back to the community storage shed, the same one that Patricia used to keep locked, except for approved events. As I drove my truck back to my house, past the entrance to Mountain View Circle where that infamous snow pile had briefly existed, I thought about how a simple request to clear a cul-de-sac had spiraled into arrests, trials, and a complete restructuring of the HOA. If Patricia had just asked nicely, if she had approached it as a neighbor helping neighbors rather than an authority figure demanding compliance, I probably would have done it. I had helped plenty of people with snow removal over the years. But she had to make it about power and control and invented obligations. She had to threaten and fine and treat me like a subordinate rather than a fellow homeowner. And that made all the difference. I pulled into my driveway, parking my truck right there in plain sight instead of putting it in the garage, because I could. Because there was no rule against it, and even if someone tried to make one, the new HOA actually followed proper procedures that would require community approval. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Good barbecue. Same time next month," I smiled and texted back. "Sounds good. I will bring the music again." And that was that. Life in Meadowbrook Estates went on, quieter and calmer and infinitely more pleasant than it had been under Patricia's regime. The houses maintained their value just fine without someone measuring the exact height of everyone's grass. The neighborhood stayed safe and clean without someone issuing fines for minor infractions. It turned out that people were perfectly capable of being responsible homeowners without a petty tyrant breathing down their necks. Who would have thought? I went inside, fed my cat, and settled into my workshop to continue restoring a beautiful oak sideboard from the 1920s. The wood grain was gorgeous under all the old varnish, and I lost myself in the careful work of bringing it back to life. Outside, snow started to fall again, light flakes that would probably amount to an inch or two by morning. Just enough that I would need to clear my driveway before work. Just my driveway, my property, my responsibility, and that was exactly how it should be. The legal fallout continued for months after Patricia's sentencing. Several homeowners filed civil suits against her for the illegal fines they had paid over the years. The HOA's lawyer, who had been rubber stamping Patricia's decisions without proper review, was fired and replaced with someone who actually understood community association law. We discovered that Patricia had been skimming money from the HOA budget to pay for personal expenses, claiming they were community costs. The new treasurer found receipts for her personal dry cleaning, her car payments, and even a vacation to Hawaii, all charged to HOA funds under vague categories like administrative expenses and community representation. The total amount she had stolen was over $30,000 across 3 years. New charges were filed, and her sentence was extended. I tried not to pay too much attention to the ongoing legal drama. I had given my testimony, provided my evidence, and done my part. Now, I just wanted to live my life without thinking about Patricia Henderson and her reign of HOA terror. But every now and then, something would remind me of the whole situation. Like when I was clearing snow from my driveway on a cold January morning, almost exactly a year after the cul-de-sac incident, and a moving truck pulled up to Patricia's house. Her husband, who had stayed quiet through the whole ordeal, was finally selling the place. I watched from my driveway as movers carried out furniture and boxes. The house looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than it had when Patricia lived there. Mrs. Chen came out to watch too, bundled in her heavy winter coat. "Good riddance," she said in her matter-of-fact way. "That woman caused nothing but trouble." "Her husband seems okay," I said, watching him direct the movers with quiet efficiency. "He was terrified of her. Did you know she screamed at him in the grocery store once because he bought the wrong brand of coffee?" Mrs. Chen shook her head. Some people need to control everything and everyone. Makes them miserable, makes everyone around them miserable. I could not argue with that. A week later, the house sold to a young couple with a baby. They introduced themselves to the neighborhood, asked about good local restaurants, and never once mentioned HOA rules or community obligations. They were normal people who just wanted a nice place to raise their kid. It was refreshing. Life continued to improve in Meadowbrook Estates under the new HOA leadership. Sarah actually listened to residents' concerns. The board meetings were productive instead of combative, and the neighborhood felt like a community instead of a dictatorship. We even voted to use some of the HOA funds to improve the playground, something residents had been requesting for years, but Patricia had always dismissed as unnecessary spending. The kids loved the new equipment, and it became a gathering place for families in the evenings. I finished restoring the oak sideboard and sold it to a collector in Denver for $3,000. Business was good, the neighborhood was peaceful, and I no longer dreaded checking my mail for bogus violation notices. But the biggest change was internal. I had learned to stand up for myself, to not back down when someone tried to bully me with fake authority. I had learned that documents and laws and procedures exist for a reason, and that knowledge is power when dealing with people who try to abuse their positions. I had also learned that sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing, and that fighting back against injustice, even small neighborhood injustice, matters. Not just for yourself, but for everyone else who might be too tired or scared to fight. The spring after Patricia went to prison, I was invited to speak at a local homeowner rights seminar. They wanted me to talk about my experience dealing with HOA overreach and how I successfully fought back. I almost said no. I did not want to be the HOA victim poster boy. But then, I thought about all the people still living under the thumb of petty tyrants in their own neighborhoods, people who did not know they had rights or how to defend them. So I said yes. The seminar was held at a community center in Boulder, and about 50 people showed up. I told my story, showed copies of the documents I had used to prove my case, and gave practical advice about how to research HOA covenants and challenge illegal fines. After my talk, at least a dozen people came up to share their own HOA horror stories. A man whose association tried to fine him for having solar panels. A woman who was threatened with foreclosure for painting her front door the wrong shade of approved blue. A retired veteran who was being harassed for flying an American flag that was supposedly too large. I listened to all of them and provided what advice I could. I was not a lawyer, but I had learned enough through my own experience to point them in the right direction. One woman, probably in her 60s, shook my hand with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I have been paying fines for 2 years because I did not know I could fight them. You just gave me my power back." That moment made everything I had been through worth it. The stress, the vandalism, the legal battles, all of it. Because if my experience could help even one person stand up to an abusive HOA, then the struggle had meaning beyond my own situation. I drove home that evening feeling lighter than I had in months. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I had the windows down, classic rock playing on the radio, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. When I got home, there was a package on my doorstep. No return address, just my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. I brought it inside cautiously, half expecting some kind of vindictive final gesture from Patricia. But when I opened it, I found a handcrafted wooden sign that said "Home Sweet Home" in elegant script. There was a note tucked inside. "Dear Zachary, thank you for everything you did for this neighborhood. You reminded us that our homes should be places of peace, not battlegrounds. This sign was made by my grandfather, a woodworker like you. I think he would have liked you. With gratitude, Sarah Ellington. I hung the sign by my front door that night. It is still there today, a reminder that sometimes standing your ground leads to something better than you could have imagined. The final chapter of the Patricia saga came almost 2 years after the initial snow pile incident. She was released from prison after serving her full sentence and completing her probation. I heard through the neighborhood gossip that she had moved to Arizona, as far from Colorado winters and homeowner associations as she could get. I never saw her again, never heard from her again, and that was fine with me. Some stories do not need perfect closure or dramatic final confrontations. Sometimes people just fade out of your life and you move on. Meadowbrook Estates continued to thrive. Property values actually increased under the new, more reasonable HOA leadership, proving that you did not need draconian rules to maintain a nice neighborhood. Families moved in, kids played in the streets, and people waved to each other instead of reporting violations. And every winter, when the snow fell and covered the mountains and roads in white, I cleared my driveway and helped Mrs. Chen with hers. Sometimes other neighbors would ask for help, and I would gladly assist because they asked nicely and I wanted to help, not because anyone demanded it or threatened fines. The cul-de-sac at Mountain View Circle got cleared by the county or by the residents who lived there, and it had nothing to do with me, just the way it should have been from the start. I am still in my house, still restoring furniture, still parking my truck in the driveway and leaving my garage door open when I work. I am still planting native wildflowers instead of approved landscaping, and no one cares because they look beautiful and support local pollinators. Life is good in Meadowbrook Estates. Not perfect because nothing ever is, but good, peaceful, normal. And I learned that sometimes the best revenge is not some clever scheme or dramatic confrontation. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well, being happy, and watching the people who tried to make you miserable fade into irrelevance while you thrive. That 10-foot snow pile that briefly blocked the Mountain View Circle exit became neighborhood legend. New residents hear the story and laugh, unable to imagine the neighborhood ever being run by someone so unreasonable. The old-timers share their Patricia stories at barbecues, shaking their heads at the absurdity of it all. But mostly, we do not think about it anymore. We are too busy living our lives, enjoying our homes, and being the kind of community that does not need someone with a clipboard and a power trip to function. And that is the real ending to this story. Not dramatic or cinematic, just quiet satisfaction and the knowledge that standing up for what is right, even in something as mundane as a homeowner association dispute, can change things for the better. I am sitting on my back porch right now, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, my cat purring in my lap, a cold beer sweating on the table beside me. Tomorrow, I will finish the restoration on a beautiful cherry wood desk from the 1890s. Next week, I will help organize the neighborhood summer barbecue. Life goes on, better and calmer than before, and that is all I ever wanted. Just to live in my house, do my work, and be left alone to enjoy the peaceful existence I worked hard to build. No more HOA drama. No more fake violations. No more Patricia Henderson. Just home, sweet home, exactly as it should be.